Welcome to sort of a special episode of Mike's medium-sized martial knife exploration journey, because it was about a year and a half ago that I unexpectedly started my big martial knife exploration journey when I picked up the Cold Steel Facon. And this knife introduced me to traditional Argentine Eskrima Criolla, an awesome martial system. And while I was diving into that reviewed my interest in other knife-centric martial arts, such as North American Bowie. And yes, that kind of changed the course of the channel away from sword reviews, and I do promise I'm going to get back to them soon. I know I keep saying that, but I got quite a few piling up behind me here. But I wanted to get this particular review out of the way first. Now, Jorge Prina described this as a belt facon or a macho facon. In other words, Cold Steel went really big with it, and that's no surprise. But as we've been talking about the balance between utility and martial, which also includes carryability, there is a knife in the Eskrima Criolla system known as the Verijero, about half the size of this, 6-inch blade on average. And I've been looking for one for a while. But the traditionally made ones, they either have mystery steel or I'm not sure of the tang construction, and because they purport to be handmade, they tend to be a bit pricey, so I haven't pulled the trigger on any of those. But I did stumble across the Nieto, well, what they call their Criollo Gaucho. And yes, it does look exactly like a kitchen knife, but there's more here than meets the eye. So let's go ahead and take a close look at it. Starting as we usually do with the sheath, and it's kind of interesting. Like a traditional Facon or Verijero sheath, it's designed to be inserted into a belt or waistband. So instead of a belt loop, there's a little sort of a tabby thing on here, and we'll get back to that. But as for carry inserted into a belt or a waistband, this is a surprisingly slim sheath. It really does disappear into a waistband. I can barely feel it. I wish I had a lot more sheaths that are this slim for that type of carry. But in making that happen, they used a, well, not just thin, but very supple leather. So this is a very flexible sheath, and that might be a concern. So far, the knife hasn't tried to destroy its own sheath. It's holding up just fine for now. But speaking of holding up, okay, back to the tabby thing. I wish they would have made this out of a thicker, more robust, stiffer piece of leather, because it's just kind of floppy. It does do the job. Catches on the belt or the waistband to keep it from slipping through whatever it's inserted in, but then it's just sort of dangling out here, and I feel like it's going to give out pretty quickly. And I may replace it. The other thing I've tried to do with it is just wear it reversed, as if this is my body side, so this is sort of just catching on my pants and is at least not, you know, waggling out here like a tongue. All right, but it does limit my carry. Belt, waistband, can also drop it in a pocket. But I figured, since I really like this knife, give it a couple of different ways to carry it. Here's a little bonus extra added review for you. I went ahead and picked up a couple of BPS knife sheaths. Now, these are an impressively robust leather. It's taco style. It's stitched. Comes with the fire steel with the little carrier loop here, so that's an awesome extra touch. Speaking of extra touches, a couple of different ways you could wear it. It's got a belt loop and a dangler. Now, the length of this particular model allows for insertion of up to about a 7.5-inch blade, which means for this 6-inch knife, it inserts down into the sheath about 1.5 inches, about right there, and fits, well, I'm going to say, perfectly. So an excellent carry option. I paid about $17 US for this on Amazon. I'll put the link in the description. Before we get to the friendly end, I wanted to talk just a little bit about traditional Verijero construction. Their handles did tend to look a lot more like this. Cold Steel got this right, with rat tail or partial tangs connected by some sort of heat-activated glue compound, like a tar mixture. And the reason for that, so it would be hopefully durable enough on a smallish, lightish utility blade, while allowing you, should you mangle, break your handle, through extended carry and use, you could easily pop a new grip on your blade, or what happened more often is the Gauchos would invest in blinging up their grips, and if they wore out, damaged, broke their blade through hard use, they would pop a new blade onto their carry jewelry. But I'm a spoiled American who appreciates a robust full tang, so when I saw that the Nieto had that, yeah, it was kind of a done deal. Now this is certainly a lot plainer and, yes, more kitchen knife looking than a traditional Verijero, but as I'm going to say a lot, there's more here than meets the eye. They put a lot of thought and attention into this rather simple grip. Brown micarta scales. You've got red liners underneath. I do appreciate that extra aesthetic touch. Double pinned to a robust 4mm thick full tang. Now, even though it looks a bit squarish, and I do not like square grips, you know that if you've been following my channel, everything has been nicely rounded off, and again, attention to detail. Relief cuts top and bottom. So I've got a finger groove and a flare, and we'll talk about that in handling. Palm swell. Same thing front to back. Everything's nicely rounded off. Fits my hand really, really well. Feels great. No flaws, no gaps, no hot spots. Functional measurements. All right, I'm going to measure functional length in the grip from the base of the blade to this point down here at 4 inches, 10 centimeters. For me, yeah, I've got a little extra room to move my hand up or down depending on how close I want to get to the blade. Width front to back at the palm swell, 7/8 of an inch, 2.3 centimeters. Thickness in the middle at the palm swell, 3/4 of an inch, 19 millimeters. Before we talk about the blade, let me give you what I've come to call my global stats, starting with how much I paid for the thing. Now shop around, because I've seen the price on this flex, well, quite a bit in the months that I've had it. Chicago Knife Works right now, I think it's going for around $55 US. Amazon 63. I'll put the links to both sites down in the description. And for that, you're getting a knife made in Albacete, Spain. And like some of the other knives we've seen made in Albacete, 4116 Mova stainless steel. Then my test files are saying somewhere around 57 HRC. So not the hardest edge, but again, they might have been going for the balance between edge retention and durability for different kinds of utility tasks. Overall length, 10 3/4 inches, 27 centimeters, as I'm looking down at my notes to give you the metric as well as the imperial, with a weight of, well, surprisingly light at 6 ounces, 170 grams. But that also means there's a lot more mass in the grip, so my point of balance is about 3/4 of an inch or 2 centimeters below the blade, well, right in that top finger relief cut. We'll talk about how that feels in handling. Blade itself, all right, so full flat grind, brush finish, very minimal secondary edge bevel. We talk about edge angle. Yes, it does look a lot like a kitchen knife. But most of my dedicated kitchen knives are keener than this. Again, I think they were going for something slightly more robust for a wider range of uses. But as we're going to see, it is still slicey and carvy, if that's a word. Anyway, all right. So, as I mentioned, Verijero blades tend to average somewhere around 6 inches. This one, if I'm measuring from the base of the blade to the tip, yes, it's 6 inches long, 10 or 15 centimeters. Width, base of the blade, 1 1/8, 2.75 centimeters, and thickness. Okay, I mentioned the tang is 4 millimeters thick. When they beveled that blade down, they did take a little bit off the spine, so base of the spine I'm measuring closer to 3.5 millimeters, with a not quite even taper down. They did keep it reasonably robust, and no, there's no real flex in the blade to speak of, a little bit. But they did polish that square spine, so I haven't been able to effectively strike a fire steel with it unless I'm using the jimping. And for me, yeah, that's a very nice transition, very good control of the blade if I make use of it with my thumb. So we're going to see in handling, I can also use a variety of other grips. Now, one interesting thing about the blade that I'm not quite certain about, very traditional relief cut at the end here. On my bigger Facon, that's big enough to become kind of a finger relief cut. This one obviously not, but I've seen this on a lot of traditional Verijero. Maybe the one thing about the knife that doesn't quite work for me. Well, speaking of, let's go ahead and get to the test footage. Not the out-of-the-box edge. I've had this knife for over 2 months now. Put it to a lot of use. Yes, it is an excellent kitchen knife. But it's also very light, easy to carry. In fact, I often forget I'm carrying it. I've used it for some carving and utility tasks in my forest of a backyard, cut up cardboard and packaging with it. Yeah, just all around very handy. Where is it currently in terms of edge? Yeah, very, very nice. And as I said, as a cardboard cutting tool, has a nice keenness that allows it to pass through the material without binding. Secure screwdriver grip is better. All right. Yeah, sliding into the blade. Thumb. No damage. Rainy day, fine carving. Yes, it is a handy tool. Especially with my thumb on the back. Yeah, that is quite nice. Oh yeah, look at that. I do really like this as a tool. Really like it as a tool. I don't expect it's going to chop, but let's see how it feels translating that impact back into me. Well, actually, fighting better than I thought it would. Absolutely not made for this. No hot spots in the grip. So how did it do? I'm actually going to go at this a little bit backwards today, starting with where it really shines for me, which was in utility use. As I mentioned, really great at food prep, utility slicing, but taking it out into my forest of a backyard to do some fine and heavier carving, yeah, it did impressively well. Feels great in hand. I feel like I have a lot of control over the blade, either in the pinch grip or more often with my thumb on the back on the jimping, light enough that my hand doesn't fatigue, and bit into the wood just really nicely. I didn't have to refresh that edge very often to be able to make really, really good use out of it as a carving tool. Now, I didn't try batoning with it. I don't think it's made for that. It might actually be able to survive it. But I did try something else I don't think it's designed for, which was a little bit of chopping. It's a very light, narrow blade. Mostly I just wanted to see how it translated that impact back into my hand. And the answer was it was quite comfortable under that kind of impact. But it surprised me by how well it did bite into the wood. So it might have a little bit of potential to go harder than I tried it. But speaking of things I tried, okay. Hacking and slashing into a piece of dry bamboo to see if I can induce a chip or a roll or fragile edge, and yeah, held up to that test just fine. Then on to the most martial test, which is stabbing and thrusting into, well, first my Pell, which is multiple layers of thick cardboard backed up by a couple of inches of compressed brown paper bag paper up against my redwood target, and then to test harder impact into harder media right into the redwood. What am I looking to test? Well, tip durability. Tip held up just fine even into the hard media. Build held up just fine. Penetration into media was excellent. But the biggest thing I'm looking for is how it translates that linear impact back into me, and does my hand stay put on the grip. We've talked about this in previous reviews. A Marshall knife without a guard. To keep your hand from sliding up into danger under that kind of impact. And this is where, okay, some issues did occur. My Carta is polished, so it is a bit slick, but it does have enough shape to hug my hand. So starting in the forward grip with the edge facing away from me, if I held onto it or put my thumb on the back, into the soft media, my hand stayed put, but going into the harder media, yeah, it started to slide up and collide with this weird little round shape, which I know is traditional, but it has some sharp edges, and worse, because my fingers are kind of thick, they kind of slid up over the top into where it was sharp, and it tried to bite me. That's a concern. Now, I could choke down and use a screwdriver grip, which is a great technique to compensate if you're using a knife that doesn't have a guard for thrusting or stabbing, is you plant the butt of the knife into the hollow of your hand, choking down, and that should help it stay put. But for me, the longer the knife gets, the weirder that feels and the less control I feel over it, and I just naturally slide my hand back up, which is potentially back up into danger. That did get worse, edge facing towards me, North American Bowie style, because now if it slipped up, yeah, that's going into the soft fleshy part of my hand, and yeah, I stopped when I felt it go that way, so I didn't actually cut myself. But because of the shape of the butt of the knife, screwdriver grip with the edge facing towards me actually feels better. What about reverse grip? Okay, edge facing away from me. I did feel like I had a pretty good grip on it. I didn't actually feel much slippage here. And I can always hook my thumb up over the butt of the knife for security, which did become really important edge facing towards me. I did feel a little bit more slippage because I didn't have this shape in my fingers. And yeah, there's potential for sharp bits to go into flesh. But again, shape of the butt of the knife, hooking my thumb over the top, very nice. All right, down to the unflattering waistline view to talk a little bit about carry. And yes, I am extremely out of shape since I blew out my back and my knee during the big move, trying to figure out how to compensate for those injuries and get myself a little healthy because it's getting bigger. But as I mentioned, very slim profile of the sheath does allow me to slip it into belt or waistband at the back or in the front, and that's fine. Especially at the back, that really does disappear. I don't feel myself carry it. It's accessible. Now, that concern about the thinness of the sheath, I would not try to reinsert the knife in the sheath with it in my waistband. The safest way to do it is always after you've drawn the thing to take the sheath out, reinsert it, and then stick the whole thing back in. And yes, I am wearing my optional BPS carry system, which is awesome. Alright, if you've been following this series, you know it's time to talk about the driving philosophy behind it, based on the wise words of Jorge Prena, that the best Marshall carry knife for you, well, it's not only the one you have on you when you need it, I hope you never need it for that, but perhaps the one you use the most for the most things, therefore you're most familiar with it. That balance between utility and martial usefulness that also helps with optics. Now, as I mentioned, in my area, when it comes to a fixed blade, I have to open carry the thing. So I'm going to have eyes on it. And a quick note about this knife. If I have it wedged into my belt, Facon carry style, even though it looks very much like, yes, a kitchen knife, that might get some attention. People might wonder what the heck I'm doing versus the belt sheath, which is a little bit more normal for a utility knife, shall we say. But how is it as a martial tool? So we really can't talk about this knife martially until we address the lack of a guard functioning as a hand stop. Now, I do have other knives that I use martially that the only guard in that sense is how the blade extends at the base from the grip, such as, well, the Cold Steel sized Facon, which then uses that traditional convex shape to actually create a rebate cut that's big enough to be, well, basically a finger choil in many ways. And I did round the edges to make those collisions more comfortable. Forward grip works really well. Actually, even with the edge facing towards me, it's enough to catch my hand and keep it out of danger. And reverse grip, it also works pretty well. But that's a big blade. Speaking of big chunky blades, another knife that does the same thing for me, this Condor Hudson Bay. I did relief cut that to make it less of a right angle, fit my finger better. Not only gets me closer to the edge for fine work, but yeah, mitigates those uncomfortable collisions, and in different kind of grips works actually pretty well. But because this is smaller and has that traditional, well, call it a bump, just kind of in the wrong spot for me. I am tempted to rebate cut that into a different shape, even though it wouldn't be traditional to do so. Don't know yet. Until then, I do have to make some conscious adaptations to keep my hand put in stabbing and thrusting. Now, the tip geometry, as I mentioned, is awesome for penetration, so that's not the problem. In the forward grip, I can kind of keep control over it, especially if I lock my thumb into the jimping, but still, if I was to hit something resistant hard, that is going to bite me. So I'm going to have to consciously shift down into screwdriver grip to keep my hand out of danger, even though for me that's more awkward to do. And that, as I said, gets worse with the edge facing towards me. But again, screwdriver grip is actually more comfortable with the edge facing towards me. But as for the blade in the edge, all right, it's too light to displace, parry, deflect an incoming weapon, and that includes, yeah, doing flat strikes or spine strikes. I may be able to take an attack at someone's incoming hand or wrist enough to make them flinch, create an opening for something else, but I'm not going to rely on it to do any real damage. Plus, don't have a back edge on it. Now, if you were paying attention, you might have noticed that I did add a chopping back edge to the Facon to maximize its option, shall we say. I might go ahead and do it to this one, but then, all right, there are places I might be traveling where a double-edged knife is a no-no. So maybe I'll just get another one of these and make a few changes to it, customize it. And if I do, there'll be a follow-up video. But until then, yeah, the only thing I'm getting on the back cut would be arcing a stab around a corner, which is still an effective technique. Now, light blade, but it's quick, so I can slash with it. That works really well, especially with tip geometry, and yes, you can see it rocks very naturally in my hand based on the shape of the grip and the balance, so I can snap cut very quickly. It's a very maneuverable knife, thumb on the back, thumb on the side, Facon carry, or just a standard handshake or hammer grip. Feels great, moves wonderfully. Edge towards me, okay. A lot less secure in the stab, unfortunately, and that's a problem because, well, one of the reasons why you would rotate the edge this way is to get more cutting action in the arc of the stab. I'm going to have to choke down, use screwdriver to keep my hand safe, at least until I experiment with a few changes to this design. Now, I don't have anything on the front for the forward stroke, but I can back cut with the existing edge, and there's an argument we've talked about in previous videos that this grip might help prevent someone from trying to grab your knife. Don't know how much of an issue or a benefit that would be, but it's there. Reverse grip. Well, let's talk about transitions first. And transitions with this knife feels great in the hand, moves great in the hand. Transitions really nicely for me. That relief cut at the top, the weight and the balance, finger twirling, yeah, really tempting, and I know it's a bad habit because it's not very secure, very easy to fumble, especially in the chaos of violence or under adrenaline or both. But pinch flipping, a little bit more secure, have that relief cut and that swelled index on, yeah, pinch flipping with this knife is really secure and smooth. Obviously, if I really wanted to be safe, I either wouldn't transition at all or I'd use two hands. But once it's in the reverse grip, okay, it's reasonably secure in the reverse grip, edge facing away from me, and if I felt some slippage, I could always hook my thumb over the butt. And not only do I get the good powerful stab, but I do get some effective slashing action at different angles of the clock. It is, again, a very light knife. But reversing the edge towards me feels a little less secure without hooking my thumb, so I really do have to hook my thumb if I'm going to go this way. Now I do have that improved cutting action in the stab, or that back hooking gripping action that we've talked about in previous videos, so that's all there. One other thing that's present is, well, I've got a bit of a corner down there and a full tang. I could use butt end as an impact tool, both for utility and martial use. Wouldn't necessarily use it as a hammer, but if I needed something in an emergency to break glass or something like that, I might be able to make it work. All right. Don't know if I'm going to make any changes to this knife or get another one and customize that one. If I do, you'll see another video. Until then, as always, let's get our conversation going in the comments. If you have this knife or other traditional Argentine or similar knives, let me know about those. If you have any recommendations, please keep them coming. And thanks, as always, for watching, liking the videos, subscribing to the channel, following my journey, putting up with my madness, and I hope to see you back for, you said, promise, there'll be sword reviews soon. Really?